So there's a 20-second delay. So between what actually appears on Facebook and what we say.
Yeah, watch live video, yeah.
This page isn't working.
Right, we're ready to go. Okay, good evening everyone, and thank you very much for sparing your time to listen to our Run to Success webinar today. I'm Chris, I'm one of the race organisers at Active Leisure Events, and as we use our high-tech technology, I've got Dave sat a little bit away from me. Dave's also on our team here, and amongst many other things, Dave looks after our training runs and he also is our in-house coach. Remotely, we've also got Mark from Katie Copeland Physiotherapy, and we've also got Liam at Up and Running, and we'll all be taking different sections of the webinar today to talk you through some ideas, hints and tips on how to enjoy your running, but also have a successful race. I think for those of you who are aware, the webinar today is primarily aimed towards the SR Chester Half Marathon, which is going to be on Sunday, the 19th of September, and the MBNA Chester Full and Metric Marathons on Sunday, the 3rd of October. I know a lot of you, from having read messages and what have you, are also running with us in the Aldi Chester 10K on the 18th of July, and it's a couple of months away now, and things looking really good for that, looking really positive, and we're looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible over the summer. Also, a big thanks today for Amanda, who looks after all our social media for us. Amanda's coordinating this for us. It's our first time doing Zoom on Facebook Live, and it seems to be working up to now, so well done and thank you, Amanda. And hopefully we won't be hit with any of the glitches that Glastonbury struggled with last night. So what we're trying to do today is help you along your training journey to run a successful and an enjoyable race. You're all very welcome, from the complete novice to those of you who are already on your running journey. For those of you who are relatively new to running, and we hope that this is just a beginning of a lifetime of running. As I said before, the key to continuing your running is actually to enjoy it. It's not always to focus on getting faster or what have you, or beating so-and-so. It's really to enjoy it, because that's what will keep you going out and enjoying your running. Please feel free to send us questions as we go along. If you fire them in via Facebook, that'd be great. And we've got a Q&A session towards the end, and we'll cover as many of those as we can. And just to let us know you're here, please send us a like or a love if you're really enjoying it. And just so that we know you're out there watching us today. It's really good, so thank you again. The webinar will be available to watch again, and it'll be on our social media pages, and it'll be on our YouTube channel. I'll talk you through how to access those towards the end of the webinar. And the aim, actually, that we've got quite a lot to cover, but we're going to be quite punchy and as brief as possible. But the aim is to last about 40-45 minutes. So if you stuck for time tonight, watch part of it and then catch up with the rest of it later on. So we've broken down into certain key areas, the things that we're looking to cover tonight. And first off, Dave is going to start off with actually deciding what you're trying to achieve in running the race. I'll then talk through some motivation and tips. And then Dave will talk about the principles of run training, and then talk about training plans and how they can help you along the journey. Liam from Up and Running will talk about shoes and kit, and there's a really key point in getting that right. That can certainly help you enjoy your running and have a successful race. And then Mark will be coming in talking about avoiding injury, and we're going to include some stretching on that. Dave's then going to talk about pacing your run, how to get the pace right. And then Mark will come back and talk about injury and illness, should you be unfortunate enough to get struck down by something. I'll then talk a little bit about nutrition and hydration, and why that's important, especially as we get into those longer runs over the summer months. I'll talk a little bit about the latest status and our plans on COVID-19, and how that that can have an impact on the event, and really hope to try and reassure you as the things that we're going to be doing to help you feel comfortable running with us. And then we'll go into the Q&A session. So I think I'll hand over to Dave now, and I'll, because we're short crewed and we're acting on COVID, I'll be our cameraman tonight and just move you across to Dave. So here you go, Dave.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. Great to be here tonight. Running is such a fantastic adventure, and it's amazing how much you can get out of it. The challenges, the triumphs, and all that goes with it, and a few injuries you'll probably pick up on the way and recover from. It's important that when you're starting out on any adventure, you know what the heck you're doing. So it's important that you really look at what your aims are to be. And for new runners, I would say that it's purely about getting to the start line in a decent condition, having a really good race that you enjoy, and the definition of enjoyment can be many things. It's just getting to the end one piece, I would say. And the really important thing is to enjoy the experience. Now, for the more experienced runners, there'll be a few more things, and I know plenty of those kind of things. It's like wanting to beat somebody, maybe wanting to achieve a particular time, and or maybe just to be the best you possibly can. So it's an adventure. It's about fulfilling what you want to do personally, and it's important that you set realistic and achievable goals in order to do that. But the main thing is to just enjoy the experience. We'll talk about the goals later on. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks for that, Dave. And certainly one of the things I picked up on that one, and certainly was relevant to me, and I did horrendously wrong in my early runs and early races, was forget about a target time. If this is your first run and you're quite early on your running journey, just enjoy it and want to carry on. And that's certainly something I should have learned at the time and stuck with. So I'm going to move on now into motivation and tips. And I think one of the things I always start off this side with is, if I can run a half marathon or a marathon, then so can you. The less chunky version that you see in front of me now is considerably reduced from what I was before I started my running journey. And that now for me is nearly 20 years ago. So forget the fad diets and what have you. Exercise, healthy lifestyle, and is certainly the right thing for most people. It certainly worked for me, and best part of 20 years down the line, I'm still thoroughly enjoying it and managed to keep the blubber at bay. So I think if I can do it, then pretty much anyone else can, and that's the message I want to get across. And I think one of the things I thought of, and somebody advised me quite early on, was to remember the reason why you were running. And we've all got different reasons. For me, it was weight control, and then to achieve something that I really didn't think I could do. I was determined I was going to do it, but I think beforehand I didn't think I could do it. And it's part of a fitness regime that you're already on, to be the best you can, to raise money for a charity that's really important. We've all got our reasons for running, but really remember those reasons and keep them close to your heart. And that will actually help as a motivation. Always remember why you've entered the race. I think Dave's talked about your race plan, and we'll cover that a little bit more later. And as I say, you've done this, you've entered this race to achieve something, to do something for yourself, and hopefully that you will be proud of and say, yes, I've done this. And certainly over the last 14, 15 months we've had, coming back into an environment where races can go ahead, I think is hopefully going to be a celebration as we edge and come away from this actually horrendous period, and where many have suffered so much. So for those of us who've been fortunate enough to come through and remain strong and keep going with our training, again, it's forget about times, forget about PBs this time. Let's just celebrate that we're here and able to do it and being back into a semi-normal environment. For those of you who are entering, targeting a specific time, it's really important to set a realistic goal for that, and pace your plan accordingly. And I think if you've got a stretch time, don't run your race according to your stretch time, but Dave will talk a little bit more about that. And then looking back as to how to motivate to get out and get training and not give up halfway, one thing that really works is tell your family, friends and colleagues, stand on a big soapbox and tell everyone what you're doing. Because what actually happens is they'll keep asking you, how are you getting on? How's your training going? And on those nights when you're thinking, it's a bit grim tonight or what have you, no, they're going to be asking me tomorrow, I'm going to get out there. And certainly when you look at the weather from inside the house, the rain hammering against the window and what have you, once you actually get out there, it's never actually as bad. And once you've been running a little while, you hardly notice the weather anyway. So it's getting out of that front door, making that first step is normally one of the hardest bits, especially when the weather isn't too good. Again, something that really works is actually getting into a routine. I think if you're working during the week and you've got busy weekends, it's you get home from work, you do what you absolutely have to when you get home. And certainly one thing that worked for me was actually get straight out, get your run, get your run done. And then when you come back, you can chill out a bit more and you can get stuck into the rest of the evening. And also in terms of eating and what have you, once you've done your run, been training, it's the ideal time to eat. So that works really well. And certainly weekends, a lot of us have busy weekends. What always worked for me is actually get up a little bit earlier on Saturday and Sunday morning for the weekend runs, get them done, get out of the way, come back, have breakfast and enjoy the rest of your day. And it doesn't really encroach that much into your day. Where possible, and I know it's been really difficult over the last 12, 15 months, is actually run with somebody else, albeit at a distance manner, or arrange to meet somebody and say, right, I'll be 2 meters behind you or 2 meters ahead. And because actually knowing that somebody's actually waiting for you is a really good motivator, because you will actually turn up then instead of thinking, oh, can't be bothered tonight, I'll do it tomorrow. Because manana runs rarely happen. It's actually do them on the day, get them done, move on, and you'll feel far better for it. I think mentioned earlier, if you're running after work or when you get home after a busy day, certainly one thing I learned to my peril, if I say, oh, I'll do this, that and the other, I'll watch the news and then go out. Once my backside hit the sofa, it was like the super glue on it. The chances of getting off again that evening were actually quite limited. So try and get it done before you sit down, because that is the relax button on. One things that help a lot of people these days are apps, gadgets, fitness watches and what have you. There's so many different ways. If you've got a smartphone, there's so many free apps these days that you can use that can actually help you track your running, and they're a massive help. And again, occasionally, and certainly might be sometimes more often than not, life does get in the way, your schedules become very busy, then you just have to adapt and get back on track as soon as possible. And I think also the other thing to actually be prepared for and accept in advance, that sometimes bad days do happen. And even after I've been running best part of 20 years, sometimes I'll go out, I'll have had a week of really good running, I'll go out and I'll have an absolute shocker. And I'll think, what's going on? I've lost everything. I can't do this anymore. And it's just some days, totally unexplainably, you have a bad run. Just do your best to finish that run. And then 99% of the time, you'll find out that your next run will be back to normal. It's just a bad day for whatever reason. Most of the time, certainly over the last 12, 15 months, most of us have been running from home. We've not been driving anywhere. But I think there's a little bit more flexibility now. So try and vary your routes to get rid of any boredom. And it just keeps it interesting and helps with the motivation. I think one of the things that really helps as well is to have a couple of interim race or events that you've actually entered along the way. I think this is really, really important if this is going to be your first half marathon or first metric or full marathon, because if that's, and also it's particularly if it's actually your first mass participation running event, because there'll be some you'll have race nerves, there'll be things that you need to learn about how things go. So it actually helps to enter a couple of races, shorter distances, and something like the Aldi Chester 10K on the 18th of July will be perfect for that. And it's actually a trial that gets you used to runs and how they work. So again, that will help reduce nerves as we get towards race day. Those of you who are going to be training for the half marathon, the metric or the full marathon, you'll find that over the weeks, your long runs get longer. And sometimes you're thinking, oh, I'm only at mile 4, I'm tired. And just break those runs down into short chunks, 1 mile at a time. Just concentrate on 1 mile. I'm going to get there. And normally the blues that you can get within a run will only last for a short while. So really just concentrate on breaking the run down into shorter chunks, and that will make it far more achievable. A really, really important thing is to believe in yourself. You've decided that you're going to do this, and let's train for success. This is all about the title of today's webinar is Run to Success. So we are aiming for success. So believe in yourself that you can do this. And again, if you're a novice and you're doing your first half marathon, first marathon, remember that there is no shame in walking a little bit, having walk breaks here and there. One of my faster marathons, I was getting really tired by mile 18, and I decided at each mile marker, I was going to walk 100 meters because I was getting tired. And actually what I found is that I didn't slow down hardly anything at all, because that 100 meters gave me a little bit of breather. And when I was back running again, I was running a little bit quicker. So I made up the majority of the time from when I was walking. So certainly keep that in mind. There is no shame in having walk breaks, and you're aiming there to finish, to enjoy it and want to carry on. And certainly walk breaks on long training runs, certainly there's no shame in those either. Do not feel you're failing if that happens. During your training runs, certainly if you're running to a training plan, you will find as you get through that training plan, you will be running on tired legs. And that is part of the aim, to actually train you to run through tiredness. But always look in the last 2-3 weeks before your actual target race, your training plan will involve reducing your mileage and reducing your intensity. And that will make sure that by the time you get to race day, you are fresh and ready. So you won't be tired like you might be at some times during your training period when you're on the big miles. So I think certainly the message from me to every single one of you out there is that you can do it, but train smartly, train properly, and you'll get there. So just moving on to the next part, the next thing we're going to talk about is charity. And we know that between 25 and 30% of our runners year on year are actually running to raise money for a good cause. And we've got different charity partners this year with the Aldi Chester 10K. We have the Teenage Cancer Trust, and massive big national charity that does amazing good work. But also we work with local charities, and our charity partner who we're helping raise funds for this year for the SR Chester Half and the MBNA Chester Full and Metric Marathons are the Northern Lights Children's Charity. Now they're a charity based locally to us. It's run entirely by volunteers. So every single penny that actually is raised goes direct towards their charitable work. And what they do is they take children with life-limiting illnesses on very, very special trips to Lapland and to Disneyland. And the real highlights of those children's lives and where they are in their journey, but also their opportunities for their parents to have a rest and a break, knowing that their children are actually having an absolutely amazing time. So last year, unfortunately, Northern Lights weren't able to do their trips because of COVID. And this year is still a little bit in the balance, but the aim is to come back and take as many people as possible once they're able to recommence. So every single penny that we can raise, and through the race directly ourselves, and also through yourselves, through your sponsorship and running for them, will actually help them hugely. So if you're interested in running for Northern Lights, there's a couple of ways you can do that. If you're yet to enter, you can actually tick the I'm interested in running for Northern Lights when you enter the event, and they will actually contact you. Or if you've already entered, you can go back in and edit your entry. Otherwise, you can contact them direct by emailing info@northernlightscharity.org.uk. So thanks for that. And next step is to talk about the key principles of run training. And I'm going to pass you back to Dave from that. So thanks for now.
Thanks, Chris. I'm now putting on my coach's hat. Okay. I'm going to divide you into two groups in true coaching style. Firstly, the novices, and then the more experienced runners. Now, I'm pretending that I'm just speaking to a novice runner now, and I'm typically asked, right, how many times do I need to run in a week? What do I need to do? Do I need to do interval runs and things like that? And I always say to them, it's important that you just do 3 runs a week. And the more important thing probably is that you rest in between them. So it's run, 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 rest, 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 run, 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 rest, rest, rest. If you do run, 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 it'll be, you'll get injured, or you certainly risk it, but we'll be talking about that kind of thing later. So what you would do if you're just doing the 3 runs a week is your long run would be traditionally on the Sunday or the Saturday over the weekend, and you would gradually progress it going through the weeks towards your target race. Elsewhere in the week, you would just get the miles in, and the training plans that we'll be talking about later suggest a progressive number of miles to do, say on the Monday and then the Wednesday and then on the weekend. Dead simple. And if you follow that, you've got you know that you're going to be supported by something that's been worked out and that is progressive and supportive to you. Now, you lot who are the more experienced runners, life gets a bit more complicated for you because your plans are to probably beat your racing rivals or beat your previous time, or just do the best you possibly can, and therefore you have to work a little bit harder, and that's where all these sessions like running up hills comes in, doing intervals, and maybe going on the track. I coach on the track on a Wednesday evening here in Chester, and that's really the sharp end of training, and it's really beneficial. I certainly think hills are worth their weight in gold as well. So don't be afraid to just get up there, get up the hills, run down, get up again, run down. And even when you're doing things like that, you should insert them into your training program in a progressive way. So you're not suddenly doing 8 hills straight away. It's all about a gradual progression. You're adapting to load, just like somebody in a gym will do a certain amount of reps with weights. They don't hit a massive amount straight away. They gradually build it up, and of course the muscle fibers break down, and then the rest days give them the chance to rebuild, and they've got a bigger muscle. Well, the same principle applies to us. If we put our leg muscles and other bits and pieces under load, they then, with the benefits of rest and recovery, they get better, and we go faster and we go longer. So certainly that's what you ought to do. I think other exercise is very important as well. In my days when I'm not running, I'm doing a lot of stretching, some weight and strength and conditioning stuff. Swimming is fantastic because it sort of loosens up all your bits, and I think that's pretty good to do. So certainly novice runners should not get tied up in having to do anything complicated. Just get the miles in and get to your race day and enjoy it and do what you can. It's almost like that's your honeymoon period. Well, once you've actually got your first race under your belt, then it's a question of I've got to do better now. I've really got to step up to the mark. So yeah, that is what I would recommend. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, thanks for that, Dave. And don't forget, if you've got any questions you want to come back to us with, just fire them across to us on the Facebook Live, and we'll come back to those, as many of those as we can. And again, don't forget to hit a like or a love to let us know you're out there. It's great to know we're not here on our own. So I'll just transfer you back to Dave now, because Dave's going to talk a little bit more about training plans. But again, one of the things that Dave was saying before, I think a lot of us have many, many different reasons for running. I think once you've done your first race, there's some people, and I know plenty of them, and I've gone through phases like this myself, I actually don't want to race. I actually really enjoy the participation side as well. So, and again, we've all got many different reasons. So participation is really good, and enjoying the camaraderie and the support of being in a major event. So I'll pass you back to Dave now, and he will talk about training plans.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Yeah, I mean, we've got a cornucopia of training plans on our website. We've had the couch to 5K. We've got the 10K that goes from all the way up to July for the Aldi 10K, and that's a one worth doing. Then we've got a 10K to half marathon schedule, which builds a bridge between having done the 10K going up to the half marathon. We can't give you one that bridges the gap between the half marathon and the marathon, because there's only 2 weeks in between them. How did that happen? So basically, we have a marathon schedule which runs from June to October, so that you can do, if your ambition at this year is to do the marathon, that's what you can do. And you could always do the half marathon as a sort of fast bit towards the end of your schedule before you taper. And I think that's a fantastic idea. So the schedules are novice. We've also got improver, or if you want to call that intermediate. There was a time when we did advanced schedules, but I always felt a little bit uncomfortable with them, because if you're an advanced runner, you probably know as much as you need to know, and why should we be telling you what to do? So whenever we were at any of the presentations that we've done that were in real life, so to speak, I was always afraid. I know most of the advanced runners in the area, and I could see them eyeing me and thinking, one day somebody's going to put their hand up and say, "Why have you put that in that schedule? That's rubbish." Nobody ever did, I'm very glad to say. But that's why I personally don't write the ones for the advanced people. And actually, on a personal note, when I'm coaching, I actually prefer the novices, because apart from the fact they're so grateful, the novices have it's so satisfying coaching novices, because the improvements can be so dramatic and so quick. And to see that on the little faces going around the track, it's lovely. But that's just me. So yeah, as mentioned before, the schedules do have, when you get into the improver territory, do have complicated bits, not just running, and they are progressive, as I said before, and it's worth making use of them. Okay, I think that's all I need to say, Chris. Over to you.
Thank you. And I think certainly, thanks for that, Dave. And one of the things I realised as I got into my sort of improver phase is you've got things like hill sessions or a speed session. You then quite often will have a shorter distance, but practice race pace run as well as your longer runs and recovery runs. So I think those are sort of things you can expect to see. But again, if you have a look at our training plans, if you've got any questions, even after this live webinar, we'll actually be taking a look at the questions and can come back if you've got anything else you want to add. So just to make sure we actually get this right and don't talk over each other. This is where I have to put myself on mute for a while, and we hand over to Liam from Up and Running, who's going to talk about kit and shoes. So I'll catch you in a little while.
Hi all, I'm Liam from Up and Running, based up on the Rose on Bridge Street in Chester. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your running clothing, kit for training, running gait. So firstly, your clothing. It's important when you go for a run that you wear some technical clothing. Make sure that you don't overheat if it's warm weather. You might make sure you're not too cold if it's a May winter like we're having now. Do you really need to have 3 layers on when you go out for your run? I know my wife, she always asks me after I've been for my run, what's the weather like outside? What do I need to wear? So I'll tell her, if you're finding a long sleeve top, she ends up putting the jacket on as well, and then gets back and says that she didn't need that jacket. So in store as well, we provide what we call a gait analysis. So that service is free in all Up and Running stores. And we don't operate a booking system for this, so just pop along whenever you get a chance and we can help get you into the correctly fitting trainers. So what we'll look at is where your foot strikes the ground. So most people, when they run, will strike on the heel first. So don't worry about that. We get people coming in having a gait analysis, they'll heel strike and they go, that's bad. It's not bad. 95% of runners that we see will heel strike. Just run how it feels naturally to you, and don't worry about trying to change your running technique. So when you heel strike, keep up to 3 times your body weight, the lower part of your body. So the cushioning in a good shoe will reduce it down to about 1.5 times. So if you think how many times you strike the ground during your run, during a 10K, a half marathon, a marathon, and all that training in between, it's important to get some good cushioning in your shoes. So there's 2 types of trainers that you'll likely end up with. You'll be in one category, that are neutral, or someone who overpronates. So a neutral runner, when they run, they'll come down and the shoe will stay nice and straight. So their ankle won't collapse in. It'll all stay nice and straight, up through their Achilles, up to the knee. And they usually have a higher arch, but going off arch type isn't always 100% accurate. So even if you've got high arch, get your gait checked out, because you can still overpronate with a high arch. An overpronator is someone who, when they run, their ankle kind of rolls and collapses inwards. So what we do, we have each brand will do shoes to kind of combat that. So there's 2 main ways. One is a medial post in the shoe. So I don't know if you can see this one here. There's this kind of plastic bit here in the arch of the shoe. What that does, it locks your arch in place and stops it from collapsing over. The other way, which is coming in the last couple of years, is something called a guide rail. And what that will do, it'll sit on from the outside of your foot, rolling around to the instep, and it'll act like the bumpers at a bowling alley. So if you go to a bowling alley and your ball's going, deviating down the funnel at the side, the bumpers will tip it back in, and that's what it does with your kind of your foot as you're running. So we can do that analysis for you in store, and it can take anything from 5 minutes to half an hour. It depends how many trainers you end up trying on in shop. We'll also be able to help you with things like your hydration, giving you ideas on how to carry things like your water with the hydration rucksacks, belts for carrying your gels, nutrition advice, because there's all different types of gels, drinks that you can have, energy bars and that type of thing. And the final thing that you might want to consider is also a running GPS watch. So these help to track your speed, your distance and your time. So it'll tell you, give you an idea as to the pace you're running at, especially on the longer runs. You don't want to set off too fast and kind of be tired after 15, 20 minutes, especially if you've got a 2-hour long run to do. The watch helps you to pace. They all do heart rate through the wrist now, so a lot of people now are starting to train within heart rate zones, so it helps with that. You can link these watches up with Strava, and if you get competitive, you can work on your Strava segments, compare yourself to your friends. The watches also monitor things like your performance, give you ideas to your improvements. Some will store music on there, so if you like to run with your music, they'll link up with Bluetooth headphones like the Aftershocks. And yeah, that's everything. So feel free to give Up and Running Chester a follow on Facebook, and hopefully we'll see you in store soon. And I'll pass you back over to Chris.
Thank you, Liam. I appreciate that, and thank you, family, for letting us pinch you off you for their evening. The next bit we're going to talk about is with Mark from Katie Copeland Physiotherapy. He's going to talk initially about avoiding injury, and then moving on to a couple of key stretches that we think will really help. So over to you now, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Hi everyone, it's Mark Curtis here, Katie Copeland Physio Practice, Lower Bridge Street, Chester. I just wanted to talk more about avoiding injury to start off with. So like Dave was saying in the training, it's really important that you build your training up slowly. The number one thing for people when they have injuries is that they're doing too much too soon. So runners always want to do three things. They either want to be able to run further, they want to be able to run faster, or they want to be able to do hills. So the really important thing is that you build up everything slowly. So like Dave was saying about building the distance up slowly, you always want to be building the speed up very slowly if you are trying to improve on a time. And also if you are going to do hills, like Dave said, is to try and gradually build the hills in so you don't do too much. And what people do tend to do as well is they incorporate things too much as well. So they'll try and go for a longer distance at a better speed, and they'll incorporate the hills as well. So especially when you're doing the longer runs, like for the half marathon, you want to be looking for your distance, but keeping it at your race pace or below that. And then when you want to do speed work and when you want to do hill works, do those on your midweek runs that are going to be less than that. That's important. So the second thing that's really important is the rest and recovery. So totally agree with Dave that for half marathon training, you're looking for about 3 runs a week, really, where you've got your 2 kind of short runs in the middle of the week and then your long run at the weekend. And it's the recovery, especially after your long run, that's important. You are going to get niggles. You are going to be sore. It happens to everyone. But you need to make sure that anything more significant that's not out of the ordinary, you let those kind of niggles ease up before you go into another run. So if after your long run, the next day you feel quite sore, don't be going for another run on that day. Make sure you let that calm right down before you try and push yourself again. Okay. And that's the other thing, really, space your runs out. Try not to do consecutive runs if you can help it. It's great to have a plan, and that will really help you with your training and your progression, but try and be flexible and listen to your symptoms if you do have any niggles. If you do have niggles that keep on coming back, and every single run you think, oh, that's tweaking again, don't ignore it either as well, because if this is happening towards the start of your training and then you're thinking about the distances that you're doing now compared to how you're going to be in a month or 2 months' time, all that's going to happen is you're increasing your distance, you're increasing your training. That niggle, if it's not going away, could get worse because all you're doing is increasing your distance and your speed and things. So I'd say really, if there is something persistent, get that assessed as soon as possible, really, by someone like myself at Katie Copeland Physio Practice. Okay. The other thing that's really important is hydration. So make sure that you're well hydrated. And I'll be talking about that in a bit with the nutrition in a bit more detail. And also sleep as well. Sleep deprivation is a big factor with people that get injuries, people that don't sleep enough. The rest and recovery, as well as spacing those days out and making sure that you get that, is the sleep aspect. That's when your body's healing at its most, and those recovery times sleeping. So make sure you get enough sleep. The other part is monitoring the stress on your body, and that can be something that's easy to do with heart rate. So look at your resting heart rate, and that should really be at about 60 to 100. when you have any stresses on your body, whether it's overtraining and you're having injuries, or whether it's illness coming on, that will tend to make your heart rate creep up at rest. So it's good first thing in the morning, just to check your pulse. So the easy one on the wrist that everyone knows about. And like I said, about 60 to 100 is your normal resting heart rate. Everybody's different, but if you've got an idea of what your normal resting heart rate is, if that starts to creep up, it's usually an early indicator that something's not quite right. And so maybe it's not a good idea to push yourself too hard when that's happening. If your heart rate is coming down, that's not too bad a sign, really. I mean, hopefully through improving your running and things, it could be a good sign of fitness. But it's the raise in the heart rate at rest that you want to be aware of. Okay. So avoiding injury, people always talk to me really about what can I do to actually avoid injury. Should I stretch before I run? Is doing stretching important? Or what should I do for a warm-up? Okay, so with stretching, flexibility isn't really that important, especially for running. If you think about the actual mechanics of running, you never take your legs through that larger range of movement. So getting increasing flexibility won't really help you to reduce injury, and the evidence shows this. What is important is strength and conditioning. That's really important. As we're running and we're going through your training plans, your cardiovascular system, your heart, your breathing, that'll improve quite quickly. So you'll find when you first start your training that you tend to get very out of breath, and that's difficult. But that will change quite quickly, and you'll be in control of your breathing and your heart rate. But the thing that you'll start to notice is, as you start to do more and more miles, is that it's your legs that are starting to give up. Your musculature responds a lot slower than your cardiovascular system does with improvements. So strength and conditioning in between your running is important to try and build up strength and endurance in the muscles, so you can run further. You won't just get that from running. You will do, but if you've got a certain time frame that you're looking for, in between your training runs, try and incorporate some strength and conditioning, okay, and that's important. So stretching before a run is actually been proven to actually reduce power output in the muscles. Okay, so it's actually a bad idea to stretch before a run, and that's a static stretch. So a typical warm-up is you should be looking at a dynamic stretch. I'll talk about the difference between a static and dynamic stretch in a second. Okay, so a warm-up really should be just preparing the body for the exercise that you're doing. So a short warm-up to get the blood pumping, get the muscles warmed up. And the warm-up can actually include, like Dave was saying, the initial gentle walk before you start setting off at your actual running pace. So that can be really important. So a few dynamic movements that are partly stretching and partly strengthening to get the muscles warmed up in the major muscle groups. And that's a good idea to do for about maybe 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes for your longer runs maybe, before you set off properly. Okay. So the major muscle groups is all you need to really concentrate on. There's no need really to concentrate on your arms or anything, do stretches there, because they're not going to be doing a lot. Your legs are the ones that are doing all the work. So when you're trying to do some warm-up and things, you're looking to get the calves, the quadriceps and the hamstrings and the gluteal muscles working the most. Okay. So if it's all right, I'll just change the camera view quickly, and I'll do some demonstrations on the difference between static stretches and dynamic stretches. Okay. So. Let's go to here. Right, so like I said, with a static stretch, you don't want to be doing this really before you run, because it's been proven to reduce muscle power, so it could actually reduce your performance rather than improving it. The static stretches, if you've got areas of flexibility, you always have tight calves or tight hamstrings, you want to be doing those in between your runs to try and improve flexibility, not before you run. So before you run, on your warm-up, you want to be doing a dynamic stretch. Okay, so a simple demonstration for the calf. A static stretch is going to be your typical stretch where you stretch the calf and you hold that position. Okay, so you hold the stretch at the end of range and you're holding for about 30 seconds or so. And normally you do about a minute's worth of stretch. So that would be 2 sets of 30. So a static stretch to do in between your runs for improving flexibility. You have the back leg straight, heel on the floor, leaning forwards into the stretch and hold that. Okay, for a full 30 seconds and doing 2 reps. But for your warm-up to get the calves working, a dynamic stretch, you're doing continuous movement. There's no hold at all. So getting in a similar position, you go up onto your tiptoes, take one leg off and down into the stretch, straight back up again, and then down into the stretch again. And you repeat that for a minute. So instead of the hold and doing the 2 30 seconds, you do it repetitively for a minute, and that will get the calf not just stretched out slightly, but also get the muscle working, okay? For the quadriceps, so for your static stretch in between your runs, everyone knows that typical stretch for the quads there. So you pull the heel right up towards your bottom, and then that you try and stand up nice and straight to get that stretch down the front of the thigh. So the static stretch in between your runs, you hold for 30 seconds and do 2 reps of that. But if you were trying to get it for your dynamic stretch before you run on a warm-up, you do it more as like a posterior lunge. So with the back leg that you're going to stretch, you go down into the stretch, aim for the knee to aim, try and touch the floor. And you'll feel that stretch as you go down. With the dynamic stretch, you only go as far as you feel comfortable and then back up. So if you feel a stretch part way down, that's fine. You won't get the stretch if you lean forward to keep the trunk up nice and straight, and you feel the stretch on the back leg. And again, you repeat that for about a minute, okay? And then for the hamstring at the back, typical static stretch for the hamstring, you put that leg forwards, lift the toes up slightly so you're just on the heel, bend the other leg and lean forward so you get the stretch at the back of the thigh, the upper thigh this time, okay? Hold for 30 seconds and do 2 reps of that for the static stuff in between your runs. But for the dynamic stretch or the dynamic movement for your warm-up, for the hamstring, you can do the one-legged diver or the Romanian deadlift, where you stand on the leg, lean forwards until you get that stretch down the back, and then again, you come straight back up again, so you don't hold the stretch at all, okay? And you'll feel that pull, and then straight back up, okay? So those are those 2 definitions between the static and the dynamic stretch, which is really good. Okay, and that will really help with the warm up just before you run into the major muscle groups. Okay.
Many thanks for that, Mark. I appreciate your time there, and hopefully we'll get that sorted. Just quickly, just from what Mark was saying, I think the dynamic stretching is really getting things moving before you start your run, and really when you get to your end of your run, as well as on days in between when you're actually warmed up already. The actual static stretches are really good at the end of a run in terms of, and certainly help me reduce muscle soreness afterwards. So that's where we are. Our next section now is going to talk about pacing and in-race pacing. So I shall transfer you back to Dave for that one. So.
Right, thanks, Chris. Yes, this is where things can be complicated, but they don't need to be. People often get very much confused as to what is race pace and what is training pace. So I'll just keep it nice and simple, nice and brief, and let's see if we can get through this. If you're training for a marathon, for instance, the kind of pace you would be looking, I'm deliberately doing it the opposite way because it does make a bit of sense. If somebody's looking to figure out what their marathon pace is going to be, they would take their half marathon pace, double it and add half an hour, and then figure out using pace charts what that would be in terms of minutes per mile. And generally speaking, that works really well. If you're wanting to do a half marathon, then you could take your 10K pace, double it and add 10 minutes, and that would give you the pace for the half marathon. Of course, if you haven't done a 10K and you're only doing 5Ks at the moment, then there's a little bit of guesswork, but that's where I think people can just take the plunge, see how they get on. I'm not even sure what my 10K pace will be at the moment because it's a full year since I've raced. So it'll be sort of like suck it and see. But once I've actually nailed it for this year, I can then do some calculations about other races. But also people tend to get very confused about what they should be doing in their training in terms of the pace they should be using. And the way I look at it is this: for your long run, you should be running at about at least half a minute slower than what your race pace is, because one of your other runs in the week could be a practice race pace, but it won't be at a long distance. It might only be 3 or 4 miles, just to get your body accustomed to, right, this is what 9.5 minute miling feels like. Right, okay, I've got that. That's what I think is the best idea for that. If you, I've lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the race pace is one thing, training pace is another. And of course, when you're doing any of your speed work, that'll be significantly faster than race pace, because that's the whole point of it. You push the envelope out in terms of what you feel you can do. So people training on the track will be certainly well out of their comfort zone in the way they're running. So I hope that has clarified, what you should be doing. So over to you, Chris. Short and sweet.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dave. And I think certainly a couple of key messages that I pick up are you've decided what you think your race pace should be, and your long runs between 30 and 60 seconds per mile slower. And part of the idea is not to get you overtired, but also to actually see you used to spending longer time on your feet, which is a key part of the training. And again, one of the things people ask me, well, how do I know if I've got my long run pace right? And one thing I normally say, if you can actually hold a conversation, not a full on, but just a gentle conversation, the odd sentence here and there with whoever you're running with, then you're doing about right there. So those are ideas. If you've got any questions, again, just firing a question. We'll hopefully cover those at the end. I'm aware that we're running slightly over time, but I think hopefully you're finding what we've got valuable and interesting. So please bear with us a little bit longer. I'm going to go back to Mark now to talk a little bit about injury and illness. If you are actually unfortunate enough, and we will all suffer from injury or illness at some stage, but I think we'll go back to Mark now a little bit, and he will take us over.
Thanks again, Chris. Right, so like we were saying before, injury or illness, illness first, it's an early indicator would be a rise in your resting heart rate. So again, do monitor that on a regular basis in the morning, and that can help you give an indication. If you do get an illness, cough, cold, whatever, the general advice is that you shouldn't really be training through that. If your body is using all its resources, its energy to actually combat that infection, you don't want to be stressing it, because you could actually exacerbate the illness and make things worse and not recover as quickly. So rest up, and once you've got that illness under control, then start training again. Okay. Injury wise then, so if you do get injured, and like I said, everyone's going to get some kind of knocks and niggles. If they're only mild, and you can work through them, but if they start to become more persistent, then what should you be doing? So there's two types of injury. You're either going to get an overuse injury, like we were talking, where you've done too much too soon. These little niggles tend to gradually build up and get out of control. Or you've had a more traumatic onset, so where you didn't see that rabbit hole as you were doing a bit of an off-road run and twisted your ankle. For those more acute onset ones, the general old-fashioned advice still still applies with the RICE. So the rest, ice, compression, and elevation. So the ice part is good to do. So getting a cold compress onto the area if there's any swelling and things like that to try and get it under control. That can help to reduce pain as well. Compression. So again, over the area, give it some support. So one of these tuber grips or a neoprene wrap or something to give compression and support around it. And that also squeezes all the inflammation out of the area and helps to improve things. And elevation again. So try and get the area elevated. So if it was your leg, get your leg up on the sofa, but also get it up on a couple of cushions. So if it was your ankle, you want the ankle above hip, so everything drains more centrally if there is inflammation and things. The advice on the rest aspect of it has changed a little bit, and the acronyms keep on changing with people coming up with new ideas. But the idea of rest isn't a good idea, because all rest is going to do is reduce your kind of training that you've built up. You're going to get stiffer, you're going to get weaker, you're going to get slower. But if it's a serious injury, obviously rest is important. But if it's a mild injury, relative rest is better. So if running is too much for, say, a twisted ankle, you could cycle, you could go swimming, cross-training, doing other activities that keeps your fitness levels up, that's not exactly running, and that can help you going. And obviously, if you do get injured, do give a health professional a call for some advice, a physiotherapist such as myself, and they can assess the injury. We've got a good idea once we've got a diagnosis and we've had that assessment. We can give a prognosis as well, how long this is likely to take to heal, and give you ideas of how to do certain rehabilitation exercises to improve the injury and speed up recovery. Hands-on treatment, massage, manipulation, soft tissue release to improve the healing time. Electrotherapy like ultrasound, laser and other things like that to speed the healing process up. So, and the general advice to get you back into your training as soon and as safely as possible. That's important. Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Mark. That was really useful. And I think the one thing that I was really pleased to hear about coming back from injury is actually active recovery, because it's allowing you to do certain things that mean that you won't actually lose all that fitness that you've tried so hard to gain. So I think that's really good news. I'll move on a little bit now, quite briefly, and talk about nutrition and hydration. And I think just a few key points that I'm going to talk about, because we can talk all day about this one. But certainly we talk about eating and main meals. And one of the things, ideally, you want to try not to eat your main meal after 6:30 p.m. in the evening. And what this does, it allows your body to start to digest and store the energy more effectively. I think eating very late and just before you go to bed, or you sit on the sofa and do nothing for the night, is actually more likely for that energy to be stored as fat, where what actually want it to do is to be stored in your actual muscles as glycogen. In doing your training, as well as potentially if you're looking to lose weight, you've got to be careful if you're doing that. You've got to look to lose weight in a controlled basis without running out of energy. So one of the things that you can do is actually, if you're still not wanting to eat big meals, is actually snack fruit and cereal bars in between meals, because what that's actually doing is actually using your energy as you're using up your glycogen supplies in your muscles, you're actually topping them up. So it's actually really useful. I think we talked about hydration a couple of times already. Hydration is really, really important, preferably water. Sometimes I'll drink very diluted cordial, just give it a bit of taste, and certainly aim for a minimum of 2 litres a day. One of the ways I do it, if I'm working, I'll have a drinks flask sat on the desk beside me, and I'll aim to get through three drinks flasks during the working day, certainly. And again, once you've been running and been on a training session, you will dehydrate, and you need to put those fluids back inside you. But also, if you're like me and you tend to sweat quite a lot, in sweat you're actually losing a lot of electrolytes and salts. So it's important that you've got a balanced diet. And if you're trying to be healthy and you're cutting out all the salts, then that's not necessarily the right thing to do, because things like salts, magnesium are a really, really important part of your diet to keep you hydrated. Talking about fueling on longer runs, I think the general principle is that once you're eating normally and your muscles are rested in between your runs, your actual muscles will actually carry enough glycogen within them for most mortals to keep you going for about 1 hour and 3/4. It's then that your body starts moving towards burning fat stores, and this is what some people actually call as hitting the wall. And it's actually quite a significant change in your metabolism within your body. And one of the things that you can do to delay hitting the wall, certainly on longer runs, is actually to gradually take on some calories, carbohydrate during the run. And that can be via gels. Some people love a jam butty, some people eat bits of a banana as they go along. And it's eating small amounts more regularly. And what you're actually doing is you're delaying the time when your muscles run out of glycogen. The important thing is not to eat and not to drink too much at one time, because when you do have food in your stomach, that actually diverts quite a lot of blood supply away from your muscles to actually digest. So I think certainly on your runs, it's drink regularly, start early. And if you're going to be taking gels or small amounts of food, bites of chocolate bars, bananas, jam sandwich, anything like that, it's small amounts. And sometimes I would do it every 2 miles. I'd take something every 2 miles, and I would drink every mile, or if it's a hot day, have a drink every half a mile. And certainly if you've got a fitness watch where you can measure your distance, it's actually quite easy to do that. So that's really, really important. One thing to look at hydration, and certainly during the day, it is the easiest way of monitoring your hydration is actually to check the colour of your urine. And properly hydrated, your urine colour should be a pale straw. If it's darker, then it often will be in the morning, so don't worry about that. But as you get into the day, you need to be drinking more to get properly hydrated. Electrolytes, I actually put electrolyte tablets into my drinks to make sure I'm getting electrolytes. Sometimes after a long run, I'll treat myself to a bag of crisps because I think it's far more enjoyable than throwing an electrolyte tablet in my drink. But it's getting that balance right is really, really important. And certainly again, after a long run, after a hard training session, there's actually quite a really effective time window to eat. And that is within 20 minutes of finishing your workout or finishing your run. And again, if I'm a little bit away from home, one of the things I try and do is I'll call into a shop and I'll have a pint of milk. Milk is actually a fantastic recovery drink. It's got carbohydrates, it's got salts, it's got protein in it, it's got fats. So it's really, really good. And again, just thinking again about hydration and staying hydrated, it's actually really quite important to think carefully about your alcohol intake, especially on the nights before morning runs and on race day, because alcohol does actually dehydrate you. So save the alcohol for afterwards when you're celebrating. Moving on to the next session now as we come towards the closing parts of the webinar. And this last 15, 18 months have been all about COVID. It's certainly had a huge impact on events and running, and rightly so. It's not been the right time for events. But as we get to the stage where more and more of us are being vaccinated, the actual prevalence of COVID within the general population is reducing, then I think coming back to events is actually a really important part of getting back to normal. I think a lot of you will actually have concerns, especially as I think our 10K on the 18th of July is possibly going to be one of the first events after things start to release. It's being careful, and you'll have many questions for us in terms of, well, how are you going to keep me safe? And we've got a few promises to give to every single one of you. I think we will follow all the requirements and more. Our overriding aim and priority is to provide a safe environment for you to run. We've got a number of different plans so we can cope with different risk levels or alert levels on race day. And we'll actually be confirming exactly what's going to happen closer to race days. And that may involve a number of different starts. It may involve a wave start. It may involve a time trial type start. But what we do promise you is your safety is paramount. And as we get nearer to race day, we will confirm to you exactly what is going to be happening on race day. I think the other huge advantage we have is having our starts based at Chester Racecourse. There's masses of open space there. And it's really important that you feel comfortable when you're with us. And if we do have mass stroke wave start, one of the things we will be providing is areas that you can maintain social distance. And if you're especially concerned and don't want to be part of a mass start, then get towards the end of that group and you will be able to make sure you've got enough space around you. And in doing that, if you start towards the end of that group, you can actually dictate the distance you've got between people. And that is really, really important. Again, we want you to feel comfortable here, and it's really, really important. So, moving on to Q&A now. We've had a few questions come in, but I think if you've been a bit shy and don't want to hit us with them now, then certainly look at the social media sites, put the questions on, and we'll be looking in and answering as many as we can. But I think certainly Steve, we've got one from Steve here, and he says, please, can you mention tapering? I've heard of tapering, and but what does it mean? Well, tapering is quite literally when you're going to a longer distance event, what you do is actually reduce the distance and the intensity of your training over the previous 2 or 3 weeks before the actual race day. And that makes sure that you're keeping the training and the fitness and everything you've worked so hard to build over those previous weeks and months, but you're actually making sure that you are less tired and you're going to get to race day absolutely fresh as a button. And Steve's also going to ask what do I do in terms of preparing for race day and the night before? One things we do with these seminars is we have another webinar in the run up to the race, and we can talk a little bit more about that nearer the time. For the SR Chester Half Marathon, which is going to be on Sunday the 19th of September, on the 5th of September, we're going to be a 2 weeks out webinar talking about what you need to be thinking about over that taper period, and also in the immediate days before the race and race morning. So we'll be announcing those nearer the time, but we can talk through those in more detail there, specifically the night before as well. Thanks to Kathy, who's written in, will we need to run wearing a face mask? Well, I think at the moment, it's up to you. There's no requirement, but if you want to run wearing a face mask and you feel more comfortable wearing a face mask, then certainly feel free to do that. I know one of the things, I've got a race coming up just before our 10K, and one of the things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be having a face mask, and I'm going to be wearing it within the start areas before the start, and certainly immediately after I finish. And during the race, I'll just put the elastics around my arm so I can use my mask at the end. So it's certainly something of choice. But if something comes up, again, one thing I said to you before, our promise to every single one of you is we will do absolutely the minimum plus quite a lot more. So our aim is to keep you safe. Neil said he's really looking forward to the training runs. I think one of the things we've really missed is the interaction with our runners over this last 15, 18 months. And it's really good to see people progressing, but I think it's not been a sensible thing to do this year. And what we're actually hoping to do is we've definitely got a training run plan for the week between the half and the full marathon, and that's going to be a 10-mile run. And we possibly might be able to get another one in at the beginning of September. But again, safety is really, really important. And so we're going to be quite sensible about that, because during races, we can ensure safety, we can make sure we've got space around. It's actually slightly more difficult when there's other people around and we're sharing paths and roadways with other people. So we'll do what we can, but I think certainly we're very much looking forward putting a full schedule of pace runs back on from the very beginning of next year. Right. Okay, I think that's all the questions that we've had. So I think very much thanks ever so much for your time. Apologies for running over, but hopefully you've gained something from this. Please send us a like or a love if you've enjoyed it, and certainly feel free to tell other people about it who you think might be worried or might be interested in joining and wanting a few more hints and tips on how to do this. We have our own Chester Marathon channel on YouTube, where we've got a number of previous videos and webinars on there, and this will be going on there later tonight. There'll be a link on our Twitter feed, which is at Chester Marathon, and on Instagram we are Chester Marathon Half and 10K. And the actual webinar itself will be on our Facebook wall shortly after we've finished on the live. And yeah, so certainly feel free to listen in again if there's things you've missed, you're a little bit nervous about things. And again, feel free to fire in your questions. We'll answer as many as we can. But for now, enjoy your running. I think it's certainly the thing I've managed to do over the vast majority of my running time over the last 18 years. And we hope to see you soon, and hopefully maybe even at the Aldi Chester 10K on the 18th of July, and then the SR Chester Half on the 19th of September, and the MBNA Chester Metric and Full Marathons on the 3rd of October. So thanks ever so much again for joining in. Thanks very much to Dave, to Mark and to Liam, and also for Amanda behind the scenes. We've managed to get through without our Glastonbury glitches. So thanks to everybody. And bye for now, and enjoy your running. Take care.